If you don't chase winning, the only thing guaranteed in life is losing. Welcome to the Rebel Academy's course on deck composition within a metagame. I'm Coach Riktus, and I'm filming this series to teach you how to improve competitively one brew at a time. If you're wondering what my credentials are, I've qualified for and played on the Pro Tour, I've beaten world champions while playing this game competitively for the last 20 years, and I've coached the guild for the past 3. Today, you learn to brew and tune with a purpose. Some coaches love to talk about theory, but I'm all about learning by applying, so let's kick things off with a case study. This is my version of Sultai Bringer in Standard. It's gone 39-6 on the ladder prior to me shooting this video, and I've hit the top 500 of Mythic with it. The first thing you need to do when you see a spicy new deck list is ask yourself the question, where does this fit into the existing metagame? This question is the underlying philosophy behind each decision you will make when constructing your deck. Why? Because when we talk about brewing and tuning with a purpose, the purpose is to beat the existing metagame. Let's apply this concept by examining what the existing metagame is. On October 2nd, 2025, we saw the first build of Sultai Bringer in an MTGO league piloted by AKA Peanut Butter, giving us our starting place. I noticed the deck while hunting for a way to beat Vivi Cauldron. As many of you are aware, Vivi Cauldron has been the top deck in Standard for nearly 3 months, making up more than a third of the meta. I've gone through countless experiments looking for a consistent way to win. Plan A is pitching a Vivi into the yard and pulling it out with Soul Cauldron, thus ramping up resources by 3 to 15 extra mana per turn, allowing the pilot to filter through the deck and set up an unlosable position, oftentimes winning on the spot with a large attack or a multitude of Vivi triggers. Plan B is a value aggression engine with profits and 14 to 16 ways to trigger it built into the main board. Mako, FOMO, and Steam Core all scale quickly here and pressure your opponent into leaving an opening so they can combo. This Wombo combo ensured that even if you stop Plan A by properly respecting their Cauldron combo, they just shift over to Plan B and run you over with giant Makos, FOMOs, Scholars, thanks to profits scaling all of their threats. So, control and mid-range archetypes have struggled against Vivi because they cannot reliably contain both of these plans simultaneously. Thus, I looked for an aggro list. Lo and behold, I came upon a mono-red build rocking Razorkin Needlehead and Scalding Viper in conjunction with Ogier Axonil. This list was brilliantly thought out, a scalable way to deal damage equal to their greed by drawing and comboing. The deck absolutely pummeled Vivi for a couple of weeks. However, Vivi, being a tier 0 deck worthy of the looming ban, simply shifted all of its flex slots in the main board to focus on beating aggro and flipped roughly 5 cards in the sideboard to help. Let's briefly clarify what I mean by the term tier 0. When a deck is tier 0 in the format, it means that you cannot reliably find a path to beating it because it can adjust its flex slots on any given week to address the new threat. Still confused? Okay, imagine it's the Eye of Sauron. Wherever that eye looks, gets destroyed, but you can sneak through Mordor, aka a tournament, if you've got a new angle of attack that the eye doesn't see coming. Alright, now let's bring it back. Now that Vivi players are focused on beating mono-red and Dimir tempo, there's room for combo decks to enter the fray. Omni Kona was the first on the scene, but with the entry of the Spider-Verse, we gained Superior Spider-Man, or if you only use Arena, the Temu version known as Karavik the Mindbitten. This card acts in conjunction with Bringer of the Last Gift to have the same effect as Living End, and the beauty of this angle of attack is that it focuses on the graveyard, which guarantees that Vivi players are poorly positioned for Game 1 with all their anti-aggro flex slots, especially if they don't see an early Cauldron to help contain our reanimation strategy. There are 2 other advantages Bringer has against Cauldron worth mentioning. First, the reason Control couldn't contain Vivi was because Control couldn't close the game out before Vivi outgrinded them. Sultai Bringer doesn't share that weakness. When we wrath the board, we also put our army onto it afterward. Secondly, Vivi had an angle of defense that invalidated most of the format's interaction, 3 to 4 copies of Into the Floodmaw. The issue with this card is that it invalidated all of the hate you could play against Vivi. High Noon and other preventative strategies don't work well when your opponent can pay 1 mana to bounce it back before going off. Your 4+ mana creatures also look a lot worse when you lose the turn trying to play them only for your opponent to spend 1 mana and essentially time walk you. You begin to see how this effect, in conjunction with an absurd amount of card advantage and an explosive amount of mana at its disposal, narrows the field to get rid of control and mid-range, generally speaking. It's also a reason why Vivi has to get banned, because it essentially erased half the macro archetypes in this game. However, since our strategy is swarm-based reanimation, into the Flood Maw can only mitigate how explosive we are. It doesn't get to negate it entirely. Thus, with control on mid-range effectively neutered and Vivi's Eye of Cauldron focused on beating aggro, we arrived at the question of how to build Sultai Bringer for the metagame. So, let's start by identifying the core components, okay? The purpose of this list is to use Superior Spider-Man as an amped up version of Zombify. And right here, yield Spider-Man, aka Kavaro, right? If you're halfway lucky, you get a pair of Craterhoof Behemoths and win the game on the spot instead of having to wait for Summoning Sickness to wear off. So we know that we need to fill our graveyard with creatures, and thus the deck needs to be predominantly focused on creatures. We also know that we are planning on reanimating these creatures, so enters the battlefield effects are at a premium here, as we're potentially getting to use them multiple times. Thus, I'll posit the following cards are staples that should not be moved around from the main board, as it would significantly weaken the core strategy. First and foremost, Combo Piece A, Kavaro. Yeah, kind of need this for the deck to work. Combo Piece B, Bringer. Also need that for the deck to work. That's the Wombo combo, right? Town Greeter. Okay, there are people that are going to fight me on this one. That's fine. You need to hit land drops 3 and 4. You need to enable graveyard synergistic strategies, and you need it to be a creature because you're going to need to bring it back with Bringer on occasion, and you're going to have to refill the graveyard multiple times on occasion, okay? Next up, Awaken the Honored Dead. It's not a creature, but it does every single facet of what you want from this deck. It has interaction in the early turns. It mills 3 cards, so it's giving you more graveyard fodder, and then it allows you a discard outlet to pull those Bringers out of your hand, the Craterhoofs out of your hand, while simultaneously getting back the combo piece you are missing, usually Kavaro. Overlord of the Baelmerk, that would be the next engine enabler. 4 of, again, you just need to be able to grab Kavaro out of the graveyard because you're going to be milling it, and you need to be able to get it. So with that, there goes 20 slots. Now, we need to decide what to do with the remaining 16 to 20 slots, depending on how many lands we need to run. So in this list, they're on Steam Core Scholar as another engine enabler. I started running a playset of these as well, but it didn't shine the way I thought it would, because without Profts, this 2/2 with Flying and Vigilance is kind of mediocre. Like, sure, it pairs nicely with Ardens, but we're not seeing Ardens here, we're seeing Craterhoof Behemoths, and even with Ardens, it's just kind of a reasonable ETB trigger, and you can get better, right? So my first breakthrough came in realizing that Kiora was probably a stronger choice because she routinely threatens her second ability on turn 4, forcing your opponent to kill her and giving you additional reanimation fodder while putting pressure on them to interact unfavorably or risk an 8/8 hitting the battlefield next turn. Now, when Lorwyn hits, we'll likely replace her with the Formidable Speaker for the Creature Tutor upgrade, but for now, I'm really liking Kiora in this spot. Secondly, Esper Origins. I don't love it. I think it's another mediocre engine enabler that everyone's hung up on as a playset, but I just keep cutting copies because I found it to be very slow in a format that wants to combo or kill on turn 4 routinely. So instead, I ended up pushing Radioactive Spider, aka Fate Weaver, which functions as an early blocker, a mid-game demonic tutor for Kavaro, and it's easy recursion with Overlord of the Baelmerk and Awaken the Honored Dead. It's a lot better than people are giving it credit for, especially because Reach and Death Touch right now means that your opponent can't just go aggro on you. They have to go through the spiders first that are going to keep coming back off Overlords. The Craterhoofs here, I swapped it out for Arden. Craterhoof would be perfect if it gave the entire team haste, but when it only gives itself that ability, it's equally liable to get hit with the Flood Maw, yet doesn't always have the same level of payoff that Arden does. Specifically, Arden grinds better. It gives your Bringers haste for the occasional combo kill, and the life gain completely alters how you play against mono red. Combine that with the decks in white that are routinely running Authority of the Consuls against us, and you'll understand why this felt like the appropriate shift. Let's also note, Craterhoof, absolute liability in the mirror match. Just wait until your opponent hits your Craterhoof with their Arden via Kavaro and immediately KOs you. Alright, next card on this list, Rakshas's Bargain. I love it for a grindier format. Once again, it just felt slow for the payoff. It's not a creature, so you're not getting it back with Bringer, so it ended up not making the cut in the end. Similarly, I did play a couple copies of Meringue River Regent at the beginning. If their 4-mana ability led to them being discarded into the graveyard rather than shuffled back into the deck, I would play a playset of this card, but unfortunately that's not how it works, so in many scenarios they're just clunky slow flyers or your worst engine enabler. Thus, those didn't make the cut either. Now, I did put Bitter Triumphs in, additional copies, because I think 4 Bitter Triumph is just correct right now. Mono Red's fast, Vivi Cauldron's fast, Simic Counters is fast. So many decks in this format are explosive, and you can't just do nothing for the first 3 turns and think you're going to win the game. You need to be able to interact, and even if they get the creature back off of Bringer, it's usually acceptable to make sure that you don't die on turn 3 or turn 4 before you can get the combo off. Lastly, being able to instant speed discard something makes our opponent a little less clear on how our turn sequencing is going to go, so they don't get to play around it as much. And the ability to blow up planeswalkers matters a great deal against decks like Dimir, because you got to kill those early Kaidos a lot of the time. So in the end, I ended up with 4 true flex slots, all right? So first, I'm going to go ahead and show you how we updated this list. So Esper Origins, gone. Steam Core, gone. Harvester, didn't want it in the main, so cut. Meringue, gone. Rakshasas, gone. So we bump up the Bitter Triumphs. Fate Weaver, we're drafting you as well. Oh yeah, we gotta get rid of Crater Hoof, sorry. Gotta get those Ardens in, baby. Love Arden. Gotta have a couple of Kioras. So this gives us 5 slots left. I'm gonna let you know in advance. Right there, 22 lands. That's not enough. You need to hit 4 lands. This deck is not reliably doing that on 22. So one of the slots is going to go to our 23rd land. We can kind of cheat on lands outside of that because we have Town Greeter, and that 4 Town Greeters is roughly equivalent to a land in this archetype. So what do we do with the last 4 slots, gang? This is where everybody is trying to figure out what to do. There is no specific right answer here. I'm just going to give you where I went with it. I grabbed a card known as Cash Grab, and I played a playset. And there are people that are like, yes, you play a couple of this or a couple Dredger's Insight or a couple, like I've seen Patchwork Beastie, I've seen all sorts of stuff, right? The reason I really, really like what this is doing is because Cash Grab allows you to do explosive end of turn plays that, again, mess with your opponent's ability to understand your sequencing, mess with your opponent's ability to estimate the battlefield and the graveyard and figure out how to navigate the situation. It gives you ready recovery. It gets you the land, the Kavaro, the Awaken the Honored Dead. Whatever you needed to hit with Cash Grab, it's hitting. The only thing it does wrong is that it's not a creature, right? But I'm amenable to that lack of synergy in exchange for being able to snag a creature or land on our opponent's end step and then push momentum into ours. So that's 37 slots decided, right? We've got basically everything's decided except for right there, mana base. Let's clean this up. When we get into mana base math, Frank Karsten wrote the Bible on it. So when in doubt, Karsten knows what he's talking about. Read his articles. I'm not a statistician. I don't understand the math as well or as deep as I probably should, but I don't have to do that to trust an expert who has a PhD in the field, because that's what we do in this game and in life. We trust the experts. So we go for 23 lands because we need to hit our 4 drops, right? Cash Grab and Town Greeter allow us to cheat a little and go down to 23. I'll just correct the mana base as we go, but first and foremost, starting Town, I don't like that here. I really don't. I don't think it's a strong card for what we're doing. I think the damage matters, and we also didn't max out on Botanical Sanctum first, which just feels criminal. Like, play the free fast lands before you play the pain lands. Secondly, you look at this mana base, you look at how it's constructed. Why are we not playing Verges, right? We have the ability to play Verge as long as we have 10 basics that turn on that Verge. That's the math for it. So if you look at this mana base right here, how do we know how many Verge, like if we have enough sources? So you have Breeding Pool, you have Watery Grave, you have Swamp, Underground, Undercity Sewers, and Underground Mortuary, okay? So that is 11 ways to turn on Verge. That's 1 more than we need. That's perfect. We still want to retain a basic land, so we'll keep the Swamp. And that gives us 2 land slots to do anything we want to. So I'm going to go ahead and posit that we need a little thing called Cavern of Souls. Why? Because people counter Kavaro, and I don't know why everyone's forgetting that. Like, Disdainful Stroke is a 2 to 3 of in most sideboards right now. Essence Scatter's in a lot of decks. You need to resolve Kavaro. If you don't resolve Kavaro, the deck falls apart. So let's make sure we have that ability with Cavern of Souls in the main as a 2 of. With Town Greeters and Cash Grabs, you can routinely find this card, which is what you're aiming to do. Now, the last part of mana base math is just lining up your early drops and making sure that you have enough sources for each of them, right? Fate Weaver, you need 14 untapped green sources if you're going to play this card, okay? Breeding Pool, check, 4. Botanical Sanctum, check, 8. Blooming Marsh, check. That puts us up to 12, and Wastewood Verge puts us up to 14. Let's also remember, Cavern of Souls, you can name Spider with this, and it gets Fate Weaver and Kavaro, which we don't mind. So totally reasonable to do Cavern of Souls for Spider turn 1 to play Fate Weaver. So we have 16 ways to get Fate Weaver out in turn 1. Perfect. Perfect. Next up, we need to make sure that we have enough black for turn 2 to get Bitter Triumph and or Overlord. Okay, now we start with Bitter Triumph because Cavern can't cast it, so we need to make sure that we have 13 black sources independent of Cavern because it can't help, right? So we have Underground Mortuary, Blooming Marsh, Watery Grave, Sewers, Swamp. That's going to get us up to 11, and then we get to count Wastewood Verge because we are routinely turning it on by turn 2 with this deck. So 13 sources, it's close, it's tight, but it works. The only card that suffers from us playing Cavern in this deck is Awaken the Honored Dead, and I think that is an acceptable trade-off right now because we need to be able to cast Kavaro uncounterably, especially in the post-board games, more than we need to hit turn 3 Awaken most of the time. And let's be clear, on all draws that don't involve Cavern of Souls as your first 3 lands, Awaken's pretty much guaranteed to hit the battlefield on turn 3. So again, that's an acceptable way to do it. And with that, Rebels, we now have our underlying theory behind all 60 mainboard slots. Deck composition is more art than science, so don't worry if you're struggling with this at first. Just remember to ask yourself the question, where does this deck fit in the meta? A majority of improving at this game involves doing the hard work up front. The way you practice dictates the way you'll play in a tournament. You don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your level of preparation. So do the hard work up front and know your deck's composition and underlying theory before you play it in a major tournament. Tune in next time as we tune up our sideboard selection. Thanks for watching, Rebels. Untap, upkeep, resist.